Welcome, Apples and Chalk viewers. I'm Dana Harrison, and today we are going to talk about social emotional issues and managing students with these challenges. Social emotional challenges are those issues people face when determining the appropriate mental and physical response to a social experience or encounter. Observe this scenario to better understand what social and emotional issues are.
Meet Charlotte, an 8th grade student with social emotional challenges, specifically anxiety attacks triggered by many things, but especially public speaking. When her issues surface, Charlotte finds it hard to articulate her thoughts and stutters in speech. She begins to sweat profusely, sometimes producing embarrassing sweat stains. She becomes overwhelmed with nervousness to the point of nausea. Watch how her social emotional issue plays a role in her school life. On Thursday, Charlotte's teacher announced that everyone will present his or her science project in class tomorrow, followed by an on-the-spot Q&A. Immediately, Charlotte began to physicalize how horrific she found this news to be. Overwhelmed with presentation thoughts, her mind began to spin and stomach began to churn. Charlotte began to physically feel sick because of the information that she was mentally processing. Because of her sickness onset by the news, she lost her appetite, skipped lunch, and later skipped dinner. Tired, nervous, and empty-stomached, Charlotte tossed and turned through the night. Her restlessness led to less than 3 hours of sleep. So far, we can identify Charlotte's back and forth mental and physical agony caused by the knowledge of having to speak publicly. Instead of asking her teacher for more time or requesting after-school assistance, Charlotte has chosen to sulk, skip meals, and loathe the arrival of her presentation. The next morning, Charlotte devised a plan to stay home from school because of a bad headache. Her parents responded, "I'm sorry, Charlotte. We don't always feel good either, but we have to go to work and push through." So off to school she went. At the beginning of class, Charlotte mustered up the courage to at least try. She put forth her best effort to conquer the presentation. However, starving, exhausted, and anxious, her emotions began to intensify. She became frustrated, and it was evident in her flushed face, sweaty forehead, and pounding heartbeat. Charlotte began to shut down mentally and physically. Taking note that her teacher was calling names in alphabetical order, Charlotte knew that there wasn't much time on the clock. It was then when she came up with her brilliant idea. If I go to the bathroom and hang out there until class is nearly over, I might be able to skip this presentation altogether. I can at least put it off until tomorrow. Her plan was set into motion. Charlotte jutted her hand in the air and said, "May I be excused to the restroom, please?" Her teacher replied, "No, you can go after you present. You're up next." Foiled in her attempt to escape, she reasoned, "I have to go." Oh, but the firm teacher that she was, she did not let up, reiterating her statement, "No, wait, please." And then Charlotte, in all of the emotional control and collectedness that she was trying to display, was triggered to the point of greater physical emotion. She made a split-second, poor social-emotional decision to deal with what she was feeling and experiencing on the inside. "I tried to ask you, but you being petty." Charlotte stormed out of the classroom, slamming the door behind her. During her brisk walk to the bathroom, Charlotte had many thoughts and didn't quite know how to reconcile them. She was relieved to have avoided her presentation, but she cringed at the thought of her consequences to come. She was disappointed in herself for disrespecting her teacher, one that she really liked at that. Her decisions and physical discomfort got the best of her. Charlotte didn't know it, but she was in need of someone to help guide her through her social emotional challenges.
From this scenario, we now understand that there are different aspects of a social emotional issue or response. We notice that there's a mental analysis that takes place. Inside of the mind, the person analyzes what to do in response to something someone did to them or something that came their way. Physically, they manifest their reasoning from that mental analysis. For instance, inside of our scenario, Charlotte was mismanaging her behavior or physically responding in a way that looked like a tantrum that resulted in her shouting and storming out. These were the physical manifestations of the mental analysis that took place when she was choosing how to deal with that social encounter. This mental and physical combined creates that social-emotional response that people speak of when we discuss social-emotional challenges. To sum it all up, a social-emotional issue is a challenge somebody faces when determining how to emote based on a particular social encounter or experience. Like Charlotte, people with social-emotional challenges see situations through a limited scope. Now, instinctively, all people desire to protect themselves. With people who have social-emotional issues, they are threatened by certain situations that are commonly viewed as trivial or minuscule. Thus, oftentimes people perceive their responses to be exaggerated, dramatic, or episodes of them lashing out. From the given scenario, there are two things that we really want you to walk away with. One, if the teacher doesn't realize that Charlotte has a social-emotional issue, this pattern of the teacher's behavior will continue, and soon the teacher will tell other teachers that Charlotte is a behavior problem. Then, Charlotte will label herself as a person who's just a behavior problem. And because of it, she may have low self-value and devalue her own education. So now we have to ask ourselves, what can educators do to create successful environments for students with social and emotional issues? Well, we have 5 things that you can do immediately so that you can better the chances of these students finding achievement in their education. As you seek to help your student with social-emotional issues, you will first want to identify what type of issue your student faces. There are several different types, and they do require some type of professional assistance to identify. They go by many names: anxiety attacks, eating disorders, aggressive behaviors, or depressive behaviors, to simply name a few. As you look into what type of behavior your student faces, you'll want to jot down different things that you see within your student. For instance, if your student comes into your classroom one day and simply lays his or her head down on the desk and begins to cry, that's something that you want to write down. Student has overly dramatic or emotional experience upon entering the classroom. Now, don't label it overly dramatic if you haven't looked into the situation. The student might be appropriately crying about something that took place at home or on the way to school. It is your job to become the investigator so that you can list out different details and characteristics of the issue that you see lying within your student. As you continue to identify what the social-emotional issue is, you'll need to list what you believe are triggers that cause this behavior to be displayed. For instance, if you notice that every time you ask a student to present something orally in front of the class, they become flustered or find an escape from your classroom, that's a trigger that you might want to list. Maybe this student suffers from anxiety when they receive public attention. After identifying the type of social-emotional issue your student faces, you'll also need to learn your student. By that, we simply mean develop a profile for your student. Identify certain things that are particular to the lifestyle of the student. You'll want to list what the familial structure or home life is like. A lot of times, students are responding to things that took place at home and not necessarily things that took place at school. For instance, if the child is inside of a home that recently experienced the divorce of the mother and father of the household, you are going to see changes in the student's behavior when they are at school. This is something key to note so that as you progress in finding out how to accommodate your student, you know exactly what to take a look at. In addition to looking at the familial structure and the home life, observe academic needs of the student. Let's say the student doesn't have any documented learning challenges or learning disabilities. You'll want to note areas of weakness for that student. If math is a weak area, expect a rise in the student's anxiety level when he or she is inside of math class. When given tests or assessments, you'll need to give the student specific guidelines and kind of cushion the student so that they don't feel as pressured because of this heightened emotional response that they are physically experiencing and manifesting mentally. You'll want to be sure to give the student a great and realistic amount of time to complete assignments and check in on the student constantly to make sure that progress is being made and that they are completing this assignment to the best of their abilities and accurately. In learning your student, also get a good feel for their daily routines. Find out what they do after school and on the weekends. Now, of course, this ties back into knowing what their home life is like, but it also dips into what their associations are. So they might have friends who are displaying similar behavior to the behavior that is being seen inside of your class. Maybe there is a correlation between the people that the student is hanging out with and the social emotional outbursts inside of the education environment. You are going to want to know whether they are making erratic or impulsive decisions with the people that they are calling their friends or their peers. Check in with other teachers as to how the student is behaving in other classes, on other teams, and inside of any organizations that the student might be a part of. There might be trends that lead you to better identifying how to manage the social emotional behaviors that you are seeing inside of your classroom. In addition to identifying the social emotional issue that your student is challenged by and learning your student, you are going to want to take formal action. Request a functional behavior assessment from your school. This way, education professionals will be able to document the triggers that you have noticed and identify plans for intervention. Most schools have behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, and these plans often lead to individualized education plans, or IEPs. Along with these documents, you are going to want to seek medical assistance. Have your student checked out by his or her doctor or pediatrician. They would likely provide advice or additional screenings so that, again, you are creating the healthiest environment for your child's education. Lastly, Apples and Chalk recommends establishing an environment that is optimal for learning and achievement. So when you are planning, teachers, you want to make sure, as always, you're considering the different types of students that you have in your classroom, specifically those with social emotional issues. Why? Students who suffer from social emotional issues are more likely to disrupt the entire class whenever they have behavior lapses. So what does this mean for you? As a teacher, you have to be planned out. Organization and planning are the heartbeat of education. Without these things, the student might end up failing or flatlining. What you need to do when you plan is think about all of the things that can go wrong inside of your classroom with this student in particular. Going back to that example of Charlotte having anxiety attacks when she's forced to publicly speak. If you know that your students are going to have to speak in front of one another, you don't have to avoid it altogether for Charlotte, but give Charlotte additional time to prepare for that speech inside of the classroom. That way, when she does it, she feels more comfortable than she would have if she was not given a lot of time. You might also identify opportunities for the student to help you so that it distracts from those opportunities that will pull the student out of them being calm and collected inside of the class. Let's say when the students walk into the classroom, you provide that student with a stack of handouts and say, Charlotte, I need you to pass one out to every single student or place one on each student's desk. Keep the student's mind occupied so it doesn't get to run back to that mental process that creates that physical manifestation where they had that emotional outburst. Now, parents, you have a large task to take up when it comes to dealing with students with social emotional issues. You have to provide a consistent and healthy home environment for that student to reach success. This goes from proper dieting and exercise to extracurricular activities, to social outlets and organizations, to proper rest and sleep at home, and then disciplining your child when your child misbehaves. You don't want to create an atmosphere where the student uses his or her social emotional challenges as excuses to miss their behavior. In order to do that, you have to reprimand them properly when they miss their behavior, and it has nothing to do with their social emotional challenges. In order to do that, you are going to have to talk to your children about the issues. Get down to the source of the issue. Why did you do this? What caused you to act this way? What did you think was going to happen? But you need to tenaciously seek to understand the reasoning of your child so that you can again assign an appropriate consequence and discourage the behavior from continuing. Your student or child is like a plant. Plants need soil and nutrients, water, sunlight, and the occasional pruning so that they grow up and blossom into their fullest potential. Students or plants with these social emotional issues need double doses of all of the things that were mentioned. Make sure you are creating a realistically healthy and successful environment for your student or child to choose success. We say choose success because ultimately the student has to make that decision. And truthfully speaking, they may never make that decision. But it is on us to hold them accountable for what we desire for them to do. Hopefully these 5 steps prove to be effective in your classroom or in your home. Thank you so much for tuning into this video with Apples and Chalk. For more information on how to deal with students with learning and behavior problems, please see the book reference in the link below. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on all of our social media pages. We look forward to seeing you next time we talk about something in education. Behaviors, aggressive, physically responding to a social experience. And physical response to a, dang, so good. Addition, Your child or student is like a plant. Plants.